Alrighty, I think we'll go ahead and get started now. Most folks have managed to make their way into the call, it seems like. So thank you everyone for joining tonight. I'm sure, like always, it's a busy time, so we appreciate you taking some time to listen to us for a bit. We're talking about calving tonight. I think it's probably a timely topic for many folks. You maybe are in the middle of calving season or starting soon, or even just thinking ahead to when calving comes around. We'll start and do just a few introductions. And so my name's Rhett Pimentel. I'm on the team here based out of Colorado. I'm a product specialist, which means I think I have a pretty fun job at Halter. I get to spend a lot of time on ranch with our ranchers, learning what's going well, what's not going well, what new things people want to see in the product, and I also help train people up on how to use the product. Hand it over to Jack.
And yeah, I'm Jack Keating. I'm an account manager with Halter, so helping out ranchers get the most value out of the system every single day, and based out of the Colorado office, originally from Nebraska, which will come into play a little bit later. And Daniel, we'll start with you.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Daniel Mushrush. We have a registered Red Angus herd here in the Flint Hills of Kansas. So it's about half fall, half spring herd. I was telling these guys we just started calving with collars on really about a day ago. And so this would just be our second season, but we're doing some things I think to kind of save us some time and some headache. So that's why they invited me, I guess.
Yeah, and my name's Hunter Hackley. I'm a seventh generation rancher at my family's ranch in Jacksboro, Texas, which is North Texas, about 60 miles northwest of Fort Worth, if you know where that is. And we've been using Halter for 2 years now. I've gone through, I guess you'd say, four calving seasons, two years of June calving and September calving. And so we've made a lot of mistakes, but also learned a lot from that experience. So I'd love to share that. I'm excited to share that with everybody.
I love it. Yeah, Daniel and Hunter were some of our first ranchers in the U.S. So they have kind of most experience probably out of most of our ranchers. So we're excited to have them here tonight. And thank you guys again for joining up for the webinar.
There we go. Here's just a quick look at what we're going to be chatting about tonight. We're going to give a quick intro to Halter, just for any folks who are joining who are unfamiliar. And then we'll go through a few different topics about how Halter can help during calving. And then we'll finish up with a Q&A at the end. And so as we go, if you have a question, feel free to pop it into that Q&A. There should be a button, I think, at the bottom of your screen, and we'll go and answer some of those questions at the end.
Yeah, and so to kick off on kind of an intro for virtual fencing kind of in general, but also Halter specifically for those who maybe aren't familiar with it. The basic system itself is a cow. You put a collar on your cow, and then you draw a fence on your phone. And as that cow approaches that boundary that you've drawn, she's going to get sound cues. This cow, for example, gets a sound cue on her left side. She turns right. They can also go right side to turn them left, depending on how they're approaching that boundary. If they continue pushing that boundary, they'll get an electric pulse. And that's kind of the containment side of keeping those cows in the pastures you draw. And then the three main pieces, I think, are containment, movement, and monitoring of these cows, right? So we have the containment done on keeping those cows where we want to. You're also able to move those cows from one pasture to the next, all from your phone. And then probably most importantly during this time is going to be the monitoring piece. Where are those cows at? Is one cow off by herself? And diving into a few of these other pieces we're going to hit on. That's kind of a big piece coming into just the calving season in general. And the three main pieces the system operate on are going to be the collar that obviously the cow wears out there and gives the cues to that cow and gives us the data we need on where she's at all times. It's going to send its data out to a tower, and that tower is going to send the data out to basically your app. And the app is where you're going to be drawing your pastures every day out there. You're going to be able to see where those cows are at. And you can have as many people on the app as you want. So if you have multiple people running these different calving hours in the wee hours of the night, they're able to see exactly where those cows are at. And you can basically manage that a lot easier through your phone and know what's going on.
Great. So that's a quick overview on Halter. But let's dive right into the topic of this webinar, which is calving with Halter. And end of February, calving season. A lot of folks are pretty busy right now, Jack. And I think a lot of people, when they think about using virtual fencing or Halter during calving, there's a lot of questions like, how can I use it? How can I get the most value out of Halter during calving? Some people are a little bit nervous about using Halter during calving season. Jack, what do you think kind of is some of the benefit of Halter during calving season?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits to using virtual fencing throughout the calving season. I mean, what we want to do is be able to give year-round benefit to you guys as producers, and that's pretty much my job on the account management side. So thinking through how we can give those calves more space during calving, ideally reduce like infections and illnesses during that first 60 to 90 days of that calf's life, which ultimately go into affecting their weaning weights at the end of the year. And if that's a heifer going into the herd, could have long-term effects on that cow's health and how she's actually going to produce in your herd and how long she's going to stay there on the backside of it. So how can we help improve, I think, that calf health during the calving time and also help promote the cow's health at the same time?
Yeah. I think like to the like nerves aspect of it, like people nervous about it. I just treat it as any other kind of use case of Halter, whether it's for pasture management or deciding when to move your cows. Halter is just another tool in the toolbox. Still depend on you as the rancher to be out there making those decisions, having kind of that context on the ground. So just like any other aspect of Halter there.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and slide.
Perfect. Well, let's jump into kind of herd organization during the calving season and what that might look like in the Halter app. I think there's obviously a lot going on during the calving season and thinking through how to manage them with the app, knowing where those cows are, which cows have calved, which ones haven't, maybe even nicknames on exactly when that cow is calved. And Rhett, I'm going to hand it over to you to actually do some showcases of this.
So let's kind of break down the different kind of groupings within Halter. Let's start with herds. Herds is kind of the highest level grouping of cattle within Halter, and herds represent distinct grazing groups within Halter. So a herd of cattle is going to be assigned to a single virtual area, and that virtual area can only hold one herd of cattle. So here's an example from my family's ranch. We have our cows herd and we have our 2-year-olds. We want them grazing separately just because we have different kind of nutritional requirements and goals for them. So they're grazing on opposite sides of the ranch in different virtual breaks. Now, you may want to kind of distinguish between animals within that herd, within a single herd. So here I'm showing our cows herd, and maybe what you'd want to do is kind of label your bred cows versus your open cows. And you still want them all contained in that same virtual area, but you still want to be able to distinguish kind of between them. So here's an example of using labels. And you can have as many labels as you want in a herd, and one label per animal.
Yeah, and on this note, on the label side, I've always thought it'd be really interesting for people to use it for showcasing AI bred cows versus bred cows after pregging. And then as you go into that calving season, you know exactly which cows are going to calve maybe sooner. And then on the back side of it, putting a calved herd and an uncalved herd, because the main point on these labels is that you can see these different colored dots on your map on the app at all times, right? Your bred herd's going to be red, your opens are blue. Same thing, you could have your calved herd be blue and your uncalved herd or your heavies be red.
Yep. And then the last thing we'll talk about here is nicknames. So a nickname is a way that you can give kind of some individual information to a specific cow. Here's an example where I've just given cow number 1 the nickname February 27th. So this maybe represents the date she calved. And so we can look back at that information later. So now I'm going to go ahead and jump into the app, doing a little live demo, which is always a little risky, but we're going to give it a go. So let me pull that up now.
And we're going to be pulling up actually Hunter's ranch down in Texas and showing a little bit of what he's working with down on their operation.
All right. See if that's sharing.
maybe.
Give it one more go.
There we go.
All right. All right. I think everyone can see that. Hunter, so I have kind of your cattle page from your ranch pulled up now. I can see you kind of have a few different herds going on here. You have September calvers, June calvers. You just tell us a little bit about how you're using herds and labels to kind of organize your cattle this year.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, we have a September calving herd and a June calving herd. And then the rest of those are our second calf heifers because we keep those separate as well. And so currently, that's kind of how we have it split out from a herd level. If you go into the individual, coming up in the next couple of weeks, we'll start to preg check. And I don't know if this herd has it, but
Sure.
we'll split them in by labels into bred and open, and that's another way we use the labels. I don't. We used to bring paperwork to working days, and now we don't. I use the Halter app to. I trust it, so it's been really good, and we've done that for the last like year that we've had the labels, so it's been great. And then like whenever we go into calving season in June, I'll use the labels to split out like when a cow is calved, and we still ride through all of our cows, especially since we're moving them on a consistent basis. Even during calving season, it's important for us to go through and pair everything up and just make sure everything's good. And I'm in them every day, every morning, if not every other morning. But it's been hugely beneficial for us on the label side to go in and say when a cow is calved, and now I don't have to ride the whole herd. I can just go and look at the specific ones that haven't calved yet if I want to, especially in some of our more brushy pastures that are hard to get to all the various corners of things. So it's saved me a ton of time and given me peace of mind that I've seen all of the ones that haven't calved yet and been able to check on them.
Nice.
Very cool. While I have it up, I'm just going to give a quick demo on how to just give a label to a cow. So I've added my own little herd here called Rhett's herd. So I'll go ahead and tap on that. And let's say I'm out riding, checking the cows, and say this T1, this cow T1, I want to go ahead and give her a label. So I'm going to click on her. I'm going to say assign label. And I can choose from a list of labels here. I can also add a new label. But I'll just go ahead and give one of these existing labels. I'll just choose a open cow for now. Click on that, and that label is going to be assigned to T1. And you can see now T1 is showing up in the app with that label. So pretty quick and simple. You could do it out in the field while you're out riding around checking your cattle.
Nice. Yeah, and again, like those labels, you can utilize it on their app to be able to see exactly which cows maybe are in the calved group or that open group or your bred group, so that you know exactly where to go. Like Hunter said, check those cows while you're out and riding the pasture. All right, now we're going to talk to a little bit more on giving space to calves during the calving season. I think one of the big benefits of using Halter is that we can give ideally more space to these cows they're calving, reduce the, I guess, amount of interactions those calves might get with some manure or other pathogens out there, reducing the illness, reducing scours, and ultimately keeping those calves healthier, reducing your vet bill, and hopefully, if they come back into the herd, make sure that they are growing well throughout the season and producing healthy calves, you know, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road after they've been capped out. So Rhett, I'll have you walk through kind of a few options there as well.
Sure. Share my screen again.
So Rhett's going to pull up his operation, Whistle Creek, up in Wyoming, and kind of walk through a few different use cases on how we can give cattle more space during the calving season as you're riding through them.
Cool. We're good? Okay. All right. So I'm sharing my screen now. Yep, this is Whistle Creek Ranch up in Wyoming. This is my parents' ranch. And so it's fun. I can mess around with it a little bit and not get in too much trouble. So what we have here is we have a herd of cows here. And let's say that I'm out there and I see this cow is about to calve, maybe this one here, and I want to just give her a bit more space, like Jack talked about. So kind of option number one would be, say in this pasture that this virtual break is drawn, that these cows have kind of some hard boundary fences around that pasture. I just want to let that cow leave the break that she's in, leave the rest of the herd, and be able to go anywhere in that pasture. So one thing I could do here is go ahead and click on that cow dot. I could also search for her if I had her ear tag number, and I can just say pause collar and hit pause. And within a few minutes, that information is going to be sent to that collar. That cow's collar is going to be paused, and she'll be free to go out of that virtual boundary and calve wherever she needs to, or maybe take her calf somewhere with a bit more space. That's kind of option one. Let's say you're grazing on a bigger pasture and you want to give those calved cows or those cows that are about to calve a bit more space, but you don't want them just going anywhere or like everywhere. And so what you might want to do is assign them to a different virtual break. And so what I've done here is I've added a new herd. You can see at the bottom called calved. And going back to that map, there's this larger break here, kind of on the southern edge, that is assigned to that calved herd. And so what I could do is, let's say this cow up here, cow C10, has just calves. I want to give her a bit more space. Instead of pausing her collar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say change herd. And I'm going to go ahead and choose that calved herd, click change herd, confirm it. And once again, within a few minutes, that cow is going to be assigned to that different herd, which means she now has access to this entire much larger virtual break. She can get some extra space, but she's not going to go all the way across the ranch. So kind of a couple options there to give cows more space during calving.
Yeah, and ideally this gives you the opportunity to obviously save a little bit of time while checking those cows and get the cow time to mother up with that calf however she kind of wants to, but not let her go, a mile or two down the road. And Daniel, I'm going to have you kind of maybe give some examples on how you've done this on your operation.
Yeah, basically that's going to be pretty similar to what Rhett just described. So kind of describe our landscape where we calve to kind of paint a picture for everybody. The Flint Hills have their name for a reason. So we have a lot of rock outcroppings. I kind of use it anecdotally. Someone told me about 5-6 years ago we had to get a UTV because it was the best tool you could use for calving. And it is absolutely tits on a board for us to do anything where we need to go because we just can't with the rocks. For some philosophy reasons, we do calve out. So, pretty common to section and a half type pastures is kind of where we do our calving, let the cows get out and work for us, not the other way around. But on the flip side of that, we're a registered operation, so we have to do a calving E score, birth weight, udder score, some of those things that we have to do for our segment of the industry, I guess, if you will. And so what those things kind of added up to was calving could get frustrating for us because we spend a lot of hours just looking for them, looking for the ones to calve because we have some, like I said, some rock outcroppings, kind of some rock draws, and then you can't necessarily see on one side. You drive a four-wheeler a mile, you turn around, a cow stands up, and there she is, and you have to drive a mile back, and it gets kind of it got hard. So the first thing we did with Halter is when they're calving, we just keep them in an area of the pasture that's easy to get to. And I know that that's pretty first principles, I guess, in a way of we just want them to be accessible. And then we do 100% of the time to this point, kind of what Rhett had described, is I'll do a paddock within a paddock. And so, those draws are great for, we haven't had bad weather yet, but, knock on wood. But if we do have a late snowstorm or something, we'll let them calve in a draw. But today was pretty nice. There's no need for that. And so I'll make a small paddock, 30 acres. I mean, it still has enough room that they can spread out if they do need to go off and calve. So maybe 30 acres for 100 pairs, let's say, or 100 cows. And then surrounding that, or maybe three sides of that, or depending on the contour, however that is, I'll open up another 150 acres for those new pairs so they can, like you said, spread out, get some space, do their bonding. And I've started calling it the modified Sandhills method because I really don't have a better name for it, but it's just like the Sandhills model. You calve them in a, and that you kind of calve them up in your barnyard and then you drive them out. What's interesting with this is you calve them there tight, you change the mob, you don't drive them, you just leave. And what's interesting to me is some of those cows will go ahead and they'll stick around with those other cows that haven't calved yet for a day or two, 3 days. They're just kind of comfortable where they're at. There'll be other cows that as soon as you change her instructions, she'll take that calf and she goes a quarter mile off by herself. But the good thing is I'm not doing it. And so we're saving labor, which is always nice. And two, I do think there's some benefits that the cows get to decide when they leave. If that calf is wanting to lay around a little bit or slow to go, she's going to stick with him. If that calf is up and ready to go somewhere and she wants to pull him off, they're going to do that too. So that's kind of how we're using it. Another thing I think that that I'm really liking calving with Halter, because of kind of what we're talking about, all of our like the Flint Hills, just the terrain, and then what it does to water, subsurface water. We don't have wells, and we dang sure don't put pipelines in because it'd be terrible. So we plan on we rely on just running water, just surface water for watering livestock. We have several of our calving pastures that are just steep-sided creek banks.
Yeah.
And we lose a calf or two a year because mom calves too close to the water and the baby's first 3 steps are right off over the bank and he drowns. So we aren't going within 200 yards of any steep banks all of calving season. Just there's no need. And so that's, a newborn calf's worth a lot of money in this market. And so kind of keeping those calves out of trouble that first 3 hours of our life, really, we're happy we have that option to do that. So, but yeah, almost always for us, it's a mob within a mob, and easy to get to. Pretty simple.
I love that. And that's a really good point on the water side of things too. I know, touring around Iowa for a little bit a few months back and people calving in some old mines and kind of the same situation. Can we keep cows away from those steep edges, keep them away from those water danger areas, and keep them healthier throughout there? Thanks, Daniel. All right, the next thing we're going to dive into, which is kind of what Daniel was talking about, is the Sandhills calving system. And I'm from Nebraska, I'm on the eastern side of the Sandhills, so not official Sandhill person, but I think talking through this is really important and kind of goes back to giving those calves space, understanding that is ultimately going to reduce their pathogen load, ideally reduce the illness on the operation. And instead of having to go out and put up polywire and move these cows manually, we're able to actually do that kind of automatically using the Halter system. And that again plays back into how are these calves going to be growing up? Can we reduce that illness in the first 60 to 90 days, keep them healthier through weaning, or as they come into the herd and have long-term really effects for those cows. So let's jump into the Sandhills calving system.
Yeah, so I think the goal here is to give you guys an idea of how you might try to implement Sandhills with Halter. You'll probably have some of your own ideas on how to spin off on it, but here's a good starting point, I think. And so I guess starting out, this might be what you look like at the beginning of the calving season. You might have your whole herd in a single, your whole group of calving cows in a single herd. Here we have the calvers, 29 head. And you kind of have this, pasture ahead of you, places for them to graze. And, maybe for those first couple weeks, I think Sandhills is typically kind of in 2-week chunks, but I'm sure you can modify it however works. So for those first 2 weeks, you might have them all together. And then after 2 weeks, you're going to have some cows that have calved out. You have some pairs out there. And what you might do then is create, just kind of like we showed before, create a new herd within Halter. Maybe you call it their calving date. So from February 1st to 14, these 5-head calve, and you might go ahead and assign those mamas to that Feb herd and go ahead and draw a new virtual break for them. And so you're going to contain that group kind of back where they calved out, and you'll go ahead and move on those uncalved cows forward. And so they're going to keep calving out away from, maybe where some of those germs were from those initial calved out cows. And you could keep going on this. So maybe after another 2 weeks, you go ahead and create another herd, and maybe your 15th to the 29th herd. So these are all the cows that calved out during then. you maybe assign them to another virtual break and move those uncalved cows forward again. And I think this is kind of one way, pretty similar to what we were talking about before, but one way you could implement a Sandhills type system using Halter. You're not out there building fence, pushing cows around.
Yeah, and I think one of the big benefits to the using like virtual fence instead of like a poly wire, for example, is this is a perfect example here. You got three different groups of cows, and you could go through in the morning and basically feed these different groups all in one layout, processed hay, or whatever you're going to do for each of these groups and drive through. You don't have to worry about opening gates. You don't need to worry about any of that. You can just drive through, feed these cows, and be able to continue on with your day instead of having to go through a few different gates and just manage that from a time and labor perspective.
Yeah, another thing I could imagine here is say you're still on some stockpiled grass or something like that. Maybe as you work your way kind of left to right in this example, maybe you're leaving that northern part of the pasture ungrazed. And that way you can keep allocating fresh pasture to those groups you're leaving behind. Maybe you're doing that. Maybe you're adding in some hay too.
Yeah.
Probably a few options there. A lot of opportunities for creativity here, I think.
Yeah. I think the final thing we want to talk through as we get through the calving season is looking towards the summer. I know some of you guys probably either peak calving season or coming up to it, and maybe you're planning on kind of your grazing plans and getting that all in order. But we want to talk about creep grazing calves because this is kind of a benefit we've seen some people have on their operations and kind of what that means from the calf health side and being able to make sure, okay, calving goes well. We did a different method. We got them, healthy through that whole process. And going into the creep grazing side of things in the summer. So creep grazing, for those that aren't aware, is basically when that calf goes ahead of the cow and grazes the fresh grass that no cows have grazed. And what this allows them to do is get that highest quality bite, first bite on the grass, and make sure to give them those nutrients that they need to grow big and strong out there and continue staying healthy through the grazing season. And ideally at the end of the year, put on more weight for weaning weights so that we can put more dollars back into our pockets. So the whole concept is that those calves grow out in front of the cows. I think it's very interesting. I don't know if I've seen any studies on this, but I'd like to see the differences between creep grazing with virtual fence versus polywire, because I think those calves reach age, they'll hit a polywire and eventually stay with mama. But with virtual fencing, there's nothing there to stop them. They have free range to kind of go out and graze in front of those cows and come back to mama whenever they need to for that milk.
Yeah. Jack, we've had Halter on for a bit at home, and I remember going back in the fall, and as I was driving by the ranch going to the house, saw all these black dots out kind of ahead of where I expected that virtual break to be. And I was like, uh-oh, is something not working? Am I gonna hear something when I get home? But no, actually that was just the calves grazing ahead of our cows. And they kind of did that all fall up until weaning. And it was pretty interesting to see how that turned out. Calves looked great. And when we weaned them, they were weighing in quite a bit higher than they weighed last year when we sold them in the spring. Pretty exciting results on that. And yeah, we're actually selling our steers tomorrow. So fingers crossed the market holds, and they're as stoked about how they look as my parents and I are. So I think creep grazing is a pretty exciting benefit of Halter, and I hope a lot of folks are seeing the value of that as they get going with the system.
Yeah. Yeah. And Daniel and Hunter, now we've kind of wrapped up a few different ways of using the system with Halter during calving season. But we want to talk with you guys a little bit on your operations and maybe how you've used Halter in the past, some learnings, and how you're maybe thinking about doing things differently this year with Halter. So Hunter, I'll have you lead us off on that question.
Yeah, so like I said, there's been quite a few benefits, and there's also been some learning experiences for us. We've been moving our cattle during calving season for decades now, and so Halter has just allowed us to have a little bit more control over like knowing where our cows are and things like that, and also when we allocate pastures and shift them, it's made it a lot easier to do it at designated times and know exactly where your cattle are going to be. But like a learning I had from this last year was I was moving them too quickly and also not allowing them to back graze and come back to their calves as much and at the beginning of calving season, and I had a few issues with that. Had to get some calves caught up. We figured it out. You know, we always end up dogging a few calves, but you find out who your bad mamas are. It's whenever it's a small percentage, it ends up being not super huge deal. It's always unfortunate, but this year I'm going to really try and use that shift to new area feature quite a lot, but leave the break large enough that they can go back multiple days of where they've been in the past, even through fences and things like that. And so, I mean, you can do that. They're going to want to go to fresh pasture anyway. I'm going to really try to utilize the app and not try and entice them to go forward and just go back and catch up stragglers and things like that when they paired up. But overall, it's been a huge asset for us, just from knowing where our cattle are, going to them, being able to change those labels and knowing which ones have calves, which ones have not. Doing the pauses. Another thing that I've learned is to really utilize pausing cows, and they'll catch up to the group, even if they're paused, and they usually always stay together. And so I'll have 20 or 30 collars paused at one time out of a 200 and something head group. And then that's fine. They end up back with the group, or I go and pair them up and catch them up horseback. So it's been great for us, and we've learned a lot, and I'll do things a little differently and be a little more intentional about some of that this year.
And Hunter, just for context for everyone, how often are you guys moving those cows during the calving season? And kind of walk us through that pausing reasoning for you guys.
Yeah, typically like this last year, because we were able to more intensively graze with Halter, we're doing daily shifts or every other day shifts, trying to do daily shifts and giving them fresh pasture every day. And then obviously letting them come back to previous areas, and not all of them might move. I mean, the ones that haven't calved are definitely going to move. The ones that have calved are going to stay with their babies typically, or if they have a bigger calf, they might move also. But the pauses, a lot of the times I utilize those pauses on, I'll even like look at my app throughout the day, and if I see one off by itself, I pause it just for peace of mind, just to make sure that if she needs to be with her baby, or she doesn't have any reason to have that baby and then leave immediately. And so yeah, I'll pause them when they're stragglers in the back, or like if I find one that's in a previous break, I'll pause it if it's calving or if it has a small calf, and just leave them pause for a while until I know that that calf is keeping up with them and moving consistently.
Nice. Very nice. Daniel, walk us through your scenarios.
Yeah, I guess the first to kind of echo on the creep grazing, Rhett said he noticed a bump in weight. We wean, obviously, when we take weaning weights because we're registered, it's 30 pounds for us. Wow. Is what it is. So in a commercial context, 30 pounds of present 500-pound calves, that'll buy you some Halter collars. That's pretty good ticket. And I would say too, what we have noticed, because we do have some bottoms that are fescue improved pastures, and so that management is almost a completely different mindset than what native grass is in terms of management. I've noticed that as we get more intense on improved pastures, we'll see more. It'll be more obvious that the creep grazing is occurring. As you tighten those cows down, you'll see those calves range a little more. But if those cows have some space, it's happening, but it's maybe not as obvious. No, just as a whole, it is an expense to do this, and so we kind of came into it. If we weren't willing to really change a lot of how we were going to run our ranch, we weren't going to implement Halter. Glad we did, obviously. And we're still pushing, like I said, the grazing thing, I think, is obviously the low-hanging fruit, I think, that everybody kind of talks about. And we can talk about grazing efficiencies and some of those some other day. It's kind of not what the purpose is here, but it's real. The ability to graze contours in native and not, I keep coming back to how rocky it is here, but we can't use step-in posts. I can't run polywire. So the ability to actually finally graze on some contours and do some rotational grazing how we wish to do it, but never could in the past is really incredible. The labor savings are really nice, kind of like Hunter kind of mentioned, knowing where they're at. That's really great. We'll time whether it's a weaning event or AI event or whatever it might be. We'll kind of strategically the day or two before kind of build those rotations. So we will rotate those cattle right to the corral. So instead of doing like a 2 mile drive after you'd spent, a day or two kind of getting them in the right place and then going out a couple hours earlier and kind of pushing everybody, we just make it so the morning we need to have the cattle in the corral, they're at the corral. That's really handy. It's really handy. We did a thing. If anybody's ever AI'd cows, the reason it's probably not done is because of all the sorting you have to do, especially sorting on baby calves. And so we did some things this year, and I actually, as I was pulling heats and doing AI and not, I had different mobs, but they were sharing a common water source, and I never sorted a calf. So that idea that did we put the right calves with the right cows? Oh, geez, I don't know. They switched. Evidently, they are each claiming a different calf, or it rained and you can't read ear tags or whatever it is. All that just kind of went out the window, and so those labor saving things I think are what are kind of neat, and the sky's the limit. Those are just some of the things that we've done. I tell people this thing, we're paying it like an employee, so treat it like an employee. Make it work. And we're still learning. We're still learning. That's kind of the fun. I feel like this is kind of a reinvigoration to the ranching industry. So up until now, I've told people that basically what we did, my great grandfather would recognize, and that's tradition's cool, I guess, but that's maybe not the healthiest industry to be in if that's how static it's been for that long. And this is really a game changer.
Love it. Well, thank you, Daniel. I think now, before we jump into Q&A,
yeah, I guess we've covered a lot of different topics tonight, hopefully giving you guys a bunch of different ideas about how you might use Halter during calving, but it also was probably a lot of information. So I just want to remind you, our support team is always here to help. All these folks are based out of our Colorado office in the US, and they're very knowledgeable about the product and know a lot about ranching. And so they're always ready to chat through with you on the phone app or hop on a call with you and help answer your questions. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have already talked to many of these folks.
Yeah, so you might, in the Halter app, you might see the little pictures pop up, but this is who you're actually talking to. You got Nicole, Coulter, Tyler, Rhett, and Kayla there to kind of support you at any moment. No question is too big or too small. That's kind of their whole job, is to answer those and make sure you guys are really set up for success. And as always, there's that urgent support button. If you ever need anything, if it's urgent to you, it's urgent to us, feel free to click that button and they will get back to you within basically a minute or two. So
even if you're, even if you're out checking your heifers in the middle of the night, and you have something that you want answered and it's urgent, if it's urgent to you, it's urgent to us, someone will get back to you right away.
It is 24/7, even during calving season. We are here for you guys. All right, well, let's jump into some of the Q&A. Be sure to be throwing those into that Q&A chat button so that we can get them answered for you guys. And please throw as much as you can at Daniel and Hunter so we can really grill them on this. But I think the first one is, can you separate cattle within the same virtually fenced pasture, like dividing the pasture in half, keeping it calved, keeping calved cows from breds out there? I think this is kind of, Daniel, maybe what you do on your operation. Maybe just chat a little bit about that. I hope you're muted.
Hold on. Yep, I was muted. Sorry. Yeah, that's 100% what we do. I mean, that is absolutely spot on. Pretty awesome, actually. And you kind of get to the point, Hunter kind of mentioned it too. You can look and you kind of know which ones have calved before you get there. If you have 100 in a pasture in a paddock, and and 96 of them are, up tight in one area, and 4 other dots are kind of on the fringe of it off in the distance. I'm like Hunter. I go ahead and pause those 4, and then I go look those up. So, yeah.
And even if you wanted to, let's say, push some of those maybe calved cows or maybe your breds further along, just like that Sandhills calving method we showed earlier, you'd be able to keep those herds completely separated using the virtual boundary and be able to manage that pretty efficiently. The next question we have is, can a single animal have multiple labels assigned to it at one time, i.e. bred, maybe crazy, or Angus?
That's a really good question. Yeah, today you can actually just have one label per cow. So you got to choose between bred or crazy, I guess.
Yeah, this is something I've been meaning to bring up with Rhett because we're hearing more and more producers kind of talk about it.
On a couple labels
right
in
now.
there. Yeah.
Yep.
What else?
Do you think you guys will ever add notes to a note tab to see calving dates, cow age, etc.?
It's a really good suggestion. Love hearing ideas like this. This is how we learn what we need to build next. It's part of my job is to hear what you guys are saying. So the questions about adding notes, I think like we've heard this quite a bit. You know, when we hear stuff a lot, that tends to make it higher up on the priority list. So I'm never going to promise like something that we're working on until we have it out to you. But since we've heard it a lot, I think like definitely something we should be thinking about. And I always like to remind people we have this big team of engineers, mostly based out of New Zealand. They're always ready to build whatever we think is most important next. And so the way we know what's most important next is to hear from you guys. So that's from talking to your territory manager, talking to me if you happen to see me or get a hold of me, or going through support and just saying, hey, support doesn't always have to be there for questions. You could be like, hey, I have this great idea. It'd be really nice if the app did this. Send those through. We collect all that information, and that's how we keep making improvements.
And the next question is for you, Hunter. Can you go back over how you navigate gathering up those stragglers, or I guess maybe probably more around how you're drawing those pastures so that those cows can go back and get those stragglers and kind of go over kind of the strip grazing, I guess, that you're going through?
Yeah, so that situation was like worst case scenario. It was a handful of calves, like 3 or 4 that I just found back because of my uh, incorrect usage of the app, I guess. I just wasn't allowing them to come back far enough on that break. And usually in the past, that would have been like the worst thing that could happen because I don't know whose mom it is. They're back. I would literally just have to pick them up and put them with the herd and hope their mom found them. With the app, I was actually able to the ones that I had tagged already, I actually was able to take them directly to their mom and they paired up, which was pretty cool. Not something I ever want to do again because you just want them to stay with their mom at all times. But the way I'll do it and the way I found out how to do it this last year after that first couple times of messing that up, I just whenever I would go to draw a new break, I would draw a new break that included the new area that I was going to allocate for them and also the previous few days of pasture that they were going to be like they were in. And then with the way the update is, or the way it's featured now is you have an option to do total area, I think it's what it is, and then there's an option to do shift to new area. And so I would then click shift to new area. And so they know to go to that new area, but when they're in that new area, they can still come back to the old area. So like they'll go eat and then they'll go eat a few bites of new grass for a few hours and then they'll come back to their baby or they'll take their baby with them. That's the best thing that could happen. But I didn't have any problems after that first few mess ups.
Nice. Very nice. One of the pieces that I think we need to talk through as well, one of the questions we had is Halter working on or already having a calving detection alert with the app? Obviously, we're collecting a lot of data on these cows. Can we throw detection? Great question for the product guy.
Throwing all the hard questions my way. Yeah, I'm gonna go back to kind of a similar answer as before. We've been hearing a lot of people asking for something like this. We're always listening. can't promise we're working on anything or when that might be available, but definitely we hear a lot about it. And the more folks can come forward and say, this is what we'd use something like this for, this is how we'd want it to look. Because there's a lot of different ways you could build something like that. And timing might be critical. The more details we can gather about what you want to see there, the more we'll know when and if we get a chance to build it. So no, we don't have that in the app today, no calving detection, but would love to keep hearing ideas on how that should look, what would be useful for you guys. That's how we're gonna build something that's actually gonna be like usable by you guys during calving.
Yeah. And one of the questions we have is we're looking at calving a large group of cows on range while keeping them moving. Any suggestions on how to manage that? A few hundred cows, 70 to 80 acres a day out on that pasture. I think this kind of goes back to maybe you, Hunter, maybe Daniel, you have some thoughts on that, but maybe any learning experiences with moving those cows during the calving season. Any new thoughts?
Yeah, like just going back to what I've said, you have to make sure that they can go back. I mean, even when we didn't have halter, we would always leave gates open behind, and go check those pastures. And I mean, if you're doing it the way that you should be doing it, you probably or not should be doing it. But if you're really wanting to get the best moms, you shouldn't worry about pushing them and shouldn't worry about pairing up backup calves if you're allowing them to come back. I guess if they have the opportunity to come back and they don't do it, they're a bad mom and they should be culled, in my opinion. But I don't always do that. I try to do a really good job of checking everything, but we're trying to get away from that a little bit more.
I think the other point to point out too is like halter's a tool, right? This isn't going to replace necessarily you guys going out there and checking those calves, making sure that they're paired up and everything's going well. The same thing as if you were putting up poly wire. What would you be doing out there in terms of cattle management and checking those calves, making sure they're healthy, making sure they're paired up before you go into that next pasture. But it's also nice, obviously, you can see the dots on the app. You kind of know what's going on and moving them slowly enough to where those cows can continue rotating around a pasture, and being able to still go back and get those calves is something that we find pretty important. One of the other questions we have is
Daniel, I think was going to jump in.
Oh, sorry, Daniel.
Yeah. I think I should be honest. So, or straightforward, I guess. We don't graze at 100% utilization during calving. That's just a conscious effort we've made. As we give a little more space, we're tromping on a little more grass. We've made that decision that our harvest efficiency is going to go down during calving season. Now, great, it's still better than what it was, just uncontrolled. But our moves are a little slower. We have a little more space than necessary, and that's just to let that process happen. And then in the chat deal, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, somebody asked on the chat, not the Q&A, what happens if like a calf goes on the other side of the boundary, and does a cow go through? The red ones, they love their babies and they go get them. So I guess if you have the black ones that aren't very good mothers, this isn't going to help you.
No, Daniel, you can't just be promoting the mushroom sale later this month.
March 20th.
Pulls up a flyer.
Yeah. I love it. Here's a good question that Daniel, this is going to be pointed towards you, and maybe Hunter, you've done this as well. But if I haven't put my eyes on a calf in a day, and would like to be able to find it, make sure it isn't sick, anything like that, is there a good way to see where that cow has been in the last 24 hours, let's say, that would help me know where to look for that calf? Daniel, can you talk a little bit about your experience with that?
So halter, it's not a feature yet you can look at, unfortunately. But halter can tell you 24-hour past movements of where a cow was. And I have used it, and halter customer service has saved a calf or two that the mother was wondering where it was, and gave me the general area where to look. And then I went up with a thermal drone. But I knew where to look. That was kind of the key to that. But yeah, halter can tell you where she calved if you kind of use your imagination and see she was here, and then did this thing and then did something else. I mean, you can kind of find that. So yeah, I've used it. It worked.
Hunter, what about you?
Yeah, we've done something very, very similar. And it's kind of cool. If there's something that's not featured on the app or that you can't see at that immediate moment, uh, whether it's data or locations or things like that, it's nice because you can ask the support team, and typically they'll be able to find it for you. It's been really nice for us.
Yep. And one of the other questions we got, and I think this is pretty specific if we're splitting herds out for whatever reason, whether it's like calving groups or breeding groups, whatever it may be. But how have you guys been finding containment on breaks where they're sharing a water source? And kind of walk through maybe some use cases you guys have had with doing that, where shared water source, but two different herds going into that same one.
I thought I got away with murder, to be honest with you. I was surprised that I was surprised we were able to do, because when we were sharing the water, like I said, we were also dumping out droves of unsorted calves and letting it kind of sort itself out. And I thought it wasn't going to work, just quite frankly. Maybe I'm negative.
Yeah. Hunter, have you guys split any herds on your place?
We haven't yet, and now that I'm hearing the success Daniel's had, I'm definitely going to try. I'm really looking forward to whenever we have some culls that this year that we need to split out. I'm going to actually try that.
Just go a little further on that kind of splitting action that we're talking about. The halter collars won't actually give cows cues to separate them apart. But what a lot of ranchers have found is by drawing a couple different virtual breaks, assigning cattle to different herds to each break, cattle will tend to drift apart. Maybe you give one group some preferential feed, some extra grass. They're going to go to that fresh grass. And if the herd they're leaving can't access that, well, the next day when you turn up, they just might be kind of separated apart. So in the app, you're definitely able to do that. It's kind of up to you to kind of be a bit creative in how you do that. Maybe be clever with giving some extra feed or whatnot. And it might take a couple hours, it might take a day or two. Kind of depends on your herd and kind of the conditions they're in. But we've seen a lot of people have some success with that.
Yeah, and I always say it's an art form more than a science. So if you guys ever have questions on sorting, maybe you draw passionate, a little nervous about it, reach out to support. They've seen it through multiple producers. They have experience with it, and they're more than happy to hop on a call and walk through and make sure everything's going swell with the sorting. Nice. This might be a good one for you, Hunter. How soon do you have cows with young calves shift before, I guess, moving them more manually? Or yeah, is that
that goes back to the pause feature. And like I said, I use that very liberally. So like if I know that she's just had a baby and she might want to shift, I'm gonna go ahead and pause her. And I'll come back to her later and get her caught up, potentially. And I said something pretty specific to our operation earlier about culling cows and stuff like that. It doesn't work for everybody, but that was something that was specific. Like for our operation, she doesn't need to be in our herd if she's not able to take care of her calf. But we try to give them every opportunity possible with the pauses, with the coming back, and so yeah.
Nice. This is a good question for both of you guys, I think, and kind of maybe shows one of the limitations of the system. But for both of you guys, do either of you run specific bulls with certain cows during your breeding season? Yeah.
Not yet. When these guys get their engineering a little more figured out, then that's what we're going to do in the future, right, guys?
No promises, Daniel. You're putting us on the spot here.
The problem is as obvious we don't collar bulls. I mean the kind of the rule number one of this, I think, is you can't make an animal do what it doesn't want to do. And so if anybody's ever had the run-ins with the neighbor's bull jumping through a brand new 6-wire barbed wire fence to breed your heifers that you didn't want him touching, if you put the value proposition in front of him that all he has to do is get a couple beeps and a couple shocks and he can do it without the barbs, he's going to do it. So we're waiting on Jack to come up with a bull collar, and then we're going to start doing all that good stuff.
Sounds like a great thing for the product team to be working on, Daniel.
That's right. There's a red issue.
Sorry, I wasn't
That's
listening.
right.
I love it. Well, I think one other question we're seeing a lot in the chat is kind of on the description piece, and also on maybe easier ways to sort those cows through the app, so that you can maybe sort out those ones you're going to cull, or your horned Herefords, or anything like that. And we definitely hear you guys on wanting to add either nicknames or notes. The easiest thing to do right now is add those labels into the app, and then on your cattle tab, it might be sorting by ear tag right now. You can sort by label, and it's actually going to show those groups in each of their label groups. So all of your open cows maybe are in one label group, calved or bred cows are in another label. And then from there, you're able to easily reassign that whole group of cows into a different group. And this could also go into your black white faces and your horned Herefords if you want to split them out at some point, or at least just know on the app and say, hey, this green cow is a horned Hereford, and she might be a little wacky. She's off by her own. And you can see the horned Herefords from the black white faces, from your red Angus, from your Corrientes, whatever you're running out there. Nice.
Well, I know there's still probably a few questions floating around in the chat and in the Q&A. We are kind of at time here. And so I think we've answered a lot of the questions related to calving and kind of calving season. Definitely, if you have more questions, if you're already with Halter, shoot them through to the support team. They'll be able to answer them. If you're curious about Halter, definitely get in touch with your local area territory manager. They'll be able to answer a lot of these other questions that you guys are all asking. But overall, thank you everyone for coming out. I know it's an hour out of your evening. We really appreciate your time listening to us. And then also really want to thank Daniel and Hunter for jumping on. Appreciate your time and your insights. You guys have been through a couple calving seasons, and hearing how you've been using it firsthand is super valuable.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel and Hunter, again. Any last thoughts? Any last things to say? Words of wisdom? I'd say no.
No words of wisdom.
All right. Well, thank you guys again. Like Rhett said, throw your questions through support. If you're using Halter, if you're not on Halter yet, but have more questions, reach out to your local territory manager. It's on the Halter website, or reach out to the website directly. And stay tuned. We'll have more of these webinars continuing on through the year. And have a wonderful evening and a wonderful calving season, everybody.
Have a good night.